Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone who's listening, and thank you very much, Brad, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Um,
I appreciate it.
yeah, no worries. And I honestly couldn't think of anyone better, to have this with, right? To have the first episode with. So as I explained to you, so this is the first part of a video series that's all about helping startup founders, right, and leaders, kind of that are in front of that big decision of, okay, is partnership making sense? How are we going to do it? What are the key things that we need to discuss? And the idea here is really for them to learn from people that have been through that journey, right? And you and I, we are one of these people. We are two of these people that have been through this. And yeah, I think there's a lot of knowledge to share, I think. And yeah, this is just a collaborative way to kind of share the experience that we have all had. With the idea is here to have one of these sessions every month, helping people out there that are in front of that decision, learning from partner leaders that have been through that journey. So that's the idea. I told you already before as well. So I've started this company, Partner Tribe, just over a couple of years ago, and we are basically a highly kind of experienced team of partnership leaders that have kind of made it their mission to kind of work with software startups and scale ups over the years to build a partnership business from scratch. Helping them to bring partners on board. How do you then deal with that? Build the strategy around it, but also how do you execute that? How do you build a team around it? And I've really, in the conversations that I've had, I speak to a lot of founders and CEOs during that time, and kind of one of the things that always come across is really that there's a lot of I guess questions around really how do you actually go about it, right? And what can you learn from people that have been there in companies that are at a stage where they want to get to, right? So and that's where I wanted to have a conversation. And I know you've been through an interesting journey. I want to definitely learn a little bit more about that. I think one of the things that I found most interesting actually about your journey was, I would say 90%, and this is just my personal number. I can't, I can't give you a guarantee for that, but probably around 80 to 90% of people that end up in the partnership world come from sales, right? They come from either like a sales function or something like that. Now, your journey has been a little bit different, right? You come from a technical background, also through pre-sales later on. We've been knowing each other in that capacity, and then you made that move to partnerships. And since then, I've been, following your journey of really building very good Microsoft related partnership strategies. How was that journey for you, and how did you get to that point?
Wow, so many good questions in there. Andre, I would say first of all, I'm flattered for being a guest on your show here. So thank you so much for inviting me. Um, I would say allow me to introduce myself to the audience first, and then we'll kind of dig into that. I would say my background, like a lot of people in partnerships, is a little bit eclectic.
Mm.
I actually started as a pure technologist, was doing in my young years, working as a bench tech, building custom PCs. That ultimately grew into standing up a small consultancy in a Xerox dealership, an agency here in the States, specifically Western New York, so pretty close to Xerox headquarters. Spent a fair amount of time there building up, again, a small regional consulting practice, kind of primarily focused on infrastructure
Mm.
and the Microsoft ecosystem, a lot of Exchange servers and Active Directory and things like that. So really kind of going back in the old days of
It's
getting
good stuff. Yeah.
small businesses online, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And navigating the .com boom, right? And that really helped me cut my teeth on what it meant to sell, what it meant to partner, and what it meant to combine those things with marketing as well. So again, very very good place to incubate a young Brad, and move into bigger and better things. Ended up going back to school, took a technology role at a Fortune 500 manufacturing organization in the chemical industry, and for me that was very eye-opening, because when we talk about partnering, we talk about all these different moving parts in the modern enterprise, and And frankly, if you've never had a chance to actually work in an enterprise, it's again very eye-opening, and it'll let you understand and have empathy with what decision makers and technologists have to deal with inside of those enterprises. Naturally, I found myself to be a little more dynamic than what a lot of corporate IT folks had in their bag. So I needed to get out of there and get my my sales itch scratched, so to speak. So I ended up moving into pre-sales engineering with Nintex back in the day. So process automation and management firm. Spent time there. Doing the pre-sales thing, really being an advocate for customers, because I was also a user before I joined that organization. And then what I found was working in those enterprise accounts, I really enjoyed all of the engagement I had with the partners that we had. And that was just very appealing to me, and I found it to be very intriguing to take the technology and use it as an accelerator for partner business, for both my organization as an ISV as well as the partner themselves. So kind of helping them build top and bottom line revenue, and then obviously sell more licenses at the organization, which again just was appealing. I went back, finished my degree in business, and was like, you know what, I think I want to accept a new challenge and focus on just the pure play partnership side of things. And that's
Yeah,
where you and I actually met back in the day. um, you know
back in the
but
days, right way.
right,
Yeah,
in the back in the year of
yeah, yeah.
time flies when you're having fun, let me put it that
For
way.
sure, for sure.
um,
Yeah.
but no, and after that, and that was, I ultimately ended up managing a bunch of larger regional systems integration partners, a couple of ISVs and GSIs. And that was very interesting working with the global systems integration partners, because their perspective obviously is much different than that of a regional, systems integrator or even an ISV. And then ultimately really found that I loved what Microsoft was doing from a technology perspective, but also from a partnership perspective. And this kind of goes back to, like, I want to say about 2017, 2018, when one commercial partner really came to be. Microsoft really pivoted from a partnership perspective. Microsoft's always been partner centric, but it's always been kind of difficult to partner with Microsoft. And there were some changes later on in the teens of the 2000s, where Microsoft really got serious about a partner program, and it's evolved, and it's now global partner solutions. And there's a whole lot of things happening in that space. But again, found that to be very intriguing. So I actually moved over to Checkpoint. We were actually the largest Microsoft co-sell partner in the world, doing thousands of co-sell deals with Microsoft, and millions of dollars in Azure consumption and all of that. And then having really cut my teeth on being a high performing Microsoft ISV partner and mature ISV partner. A former colleague of mine, and a friend of mine reached out and said, I'm with this firm that wants to stand up a Microsoft technology and partnership practice. So wanted to start it from scratch, so to speak, at a startup. So that's kind of my journey. I know that's a little long-winded, but it's very much grounded in the technology being not only an equalizer for end customers to be able to really realize digital transformation, but also just how do you get it done
Yeah.
without being able to necessarily have all of the pieces in place to execute on that dream, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been an interesting journey, but it's been a lot of fun. So I can
I
definitely
imagine.
drill into a lot of specific
Yeah.
areas in there, but yeah, that's where I'll
Very
stop right
cool. No, thank you. That's awesome. And I think with your background, one of the things that made it very interesting for me as well to have you here is the fact that a lot of the founders that I actually talk to are technical, right? They are technical founders, still kind of getting some of them earlier stage, some of them a little bit further down the line, but very often they stand in front of that decision, right? Okay, we can continue growing by product-led growth or by throwing sales bodies at it, or we venture down that partnership route. But most of the time they don't necessarily have the answers to how we do that, right? So I think you have a really high level of appreciation for being in that spot and what to do to get out of it. So so since you've made that move, and obviously kind of then had that learning, is a very straightforward or basic question, but what are the key learnings that you've had in your journey now since you've been on the partnership side, that you would give your younger self, or your tech founder kind of self, if you were in that situation, that on how to go about partnerships and how to start building it?
Great question. I would say, this kind of touches back on your earlier point too,
Mm,
about how partnerships take kind of all kinds and are traditionally kind of where a lot of people who are in selling roles end up. Um, and for better or worse, right? Is it the reason why sellers show up in partnership roles is because, they're not effective enough at closing opportunities, whatever it may be, or is it, excuse me, is it a marketing person that was just really good at relationships? Was it a technical person that also was good at there's lots of different kind of types that create that partnership person. But I would say the biggest thing that everyone needs to know going into partnerships is that we don't know everything. I know it sounds a
mm,
little, pedestrian to say
mm,
that, but we don't have all the answers. And I think that the people who are really exceptional at partnering are the ones who go, you know, this is where I'm starting. This is where I want to go. And I might not have all the answers for the in between those two different points, but I'm going to work with people who can help
mm,
me figure that out. And this, I mean, it goes for any role in the world, right? Is is figuring out and building the right, network and the right processes to be able to facilitate the growth and the, satisfying the needs of both the
mm,
business and the customers
mm,
to have a successful partnership. So again, I think it's identifying, champions inside of the business, champions at your, whatever organization you're trying to partner with, and making sure that you understand what the mutual outcomes are that you want. And
yeah.
naturally, how everyone makes money and gets paid, right? Because,
Mm,
when we think about a partnering motion, what's the objective of the partnership? And the partnership, from my mind, especially working on an ISV side and very specifically inside of a startup, um, is it we want to be acquired by a partner? Is it we want to just get more leads? Do we want to just close more business? Or do we want something else, right? What exactly is it that we want? And I think focusing on what it is that you want to get out of the partnership and at least having not a completely realized vision of what that will look like, but having an idea of what you want out of the partnership is really,
mm,
really important. And then from
yeah.
there, you can obviously build the metrics and figure out how to measure it and drive success on the back end of it.
That's a
So
really good point. Yeah, absolutely. No, I fully agree. And the thing is, so when I'm doing the discovery kind of conversations and early stage conversations with with founders and startup owners, the first question is, well, what is the end game, right? What are you trying to do? Are you do you have an exit strategy? Are you trying to be $1 billion company, or are you wanting to be bought by an ecosystem? Right? Because based on that, like there's certain nuances on how you probably would approach this whole topic of building partnerships differently, right? I always talk about, we have commercial partnerships and we have non-commercial partnerships. Non-commercial partnerships could be anything to do with the product that is really mostly there to enhance your product, but they're not necessarily commercially putting anything in place where we're saying, okay, you're going to make revenue with that or leads with that, right? And then commercial partnerships, that's where most of my customers are interested in, is how do we grow, right? How do we grow,
mhm.
create growth, drive revenue with partnerships, and how do we go about it? So I think that makes that makes perfect sense. And then, do you have any specific, like I love the specifics. So do you have any specific like kind of scenarios or stories that you can share, of where you feel like they really stuck out within your partnership career?
I do. But before I get into that, I almost want
Mm,
to touch on a point you just made. And that
mm,
is, it's always good to begin with the end in mind. But I
mm,
will say this, having worked with, several different founders,
mm,
I think some founders don't necessarily know what they don't know, and they don't
mm.
necessarily know what they want exactly out of a
Yeah.
partnership. Now, again, that's not to say all of them don't. There's a
Mm,
lot who do.
mm,
Um, but knowing where you want to focus the energies, again, I don't think we need to double down on that, because I do think that is the
mm,
most efficient way to figure out where you want to spend the time in the partnership. Um,
mm,
and it also depends on the profile of your business. Thinking about, again, customers, or excuse me, thinking about companies that are ISVs, especially startup ISVs who are building technology for whatever business case or whatever gap exists in some other platform, and they're trying to sell, a product around that. I think it all depends on what the product's focus is, and again, ISVs are product-driven companies. At least they should be, because that's why they're building software, is to satisfy some kind of requirement for a customer. But I do think that that needs to be really focused on. It's like, if we're just a niche player who built a technology as a minimum viable product, and it plugs a hole in say an ecosystem play, well, I mean, that would probably lend itself to, maybe we want to be acquired by either
Mm.
another ISV, excuse me, or by the ecosystem vendor themselves, versus an ISV building software that has broad applicability. Just to pick a name out of a hat, if we're Workday, for example, well, everyone needs HRIS software, and a SaaS version of it is pretty broadly applicable. So in that case, I may not want to be acquired, maybe eventually, but I want sales. I want to drive, leads into the bucket at the top of the funnel, and I want to work those, and I want to get them closed, and then build my ARR, so I can build the value of my business to either go public, or be bought, or whatever the economic event is on the back end. So again, I think those are all things that are very, very important, that founders really need to be mindful of, what the end game looks like. And
Mm.
naturally, this is a reference I like to use. Sometimes you have to play jazz, meaning you got to be able to kind of roll with things and decide,
Mm.
maybe we wanted to be acquired, but now we have hit critical mass and we want to just focus on sales, or what
Yeah,
have you. So, being able to adjust. So I think that's really important. But
absolutely. Yeah.
when it comes to the scenarios, I think that, if there's a specific type of scenario that I would probably focus on, it's probably it's probably on deciding how I want to partner, not necessarily with an ecosystem partner, but more
Mm.
of, if my organization wants to have a channel play. I think that's
Mm.
probably the biggest one that sticks out to me. Is a lot of ISVs. Again, I'm kind of biased, just because I've spent so much of my time working at ISVs. Is that we as ISVs tend to want to go and just sell stuff. We know our
Mm.
product. Um, we know what the personas are that we're selling to. We know our ideal customer profile, et cetera. And then we have, hopefully, a sales process, and we're going out there and we're selling it.
Mm.
So I do think a lot of ISVs, at least modern SaaS ISVs, have a very good direct selling motion. And that's a pro and a con as you scale. If you're satisfied with where you are today with that direct motion, and you are running the company as a lifestyle company, well, then maybe that's fine.
Mm.
But to move on to the next evolution of your organization, typically you have to look at hyperscalers like a Microsoft, an AWS, a Google, from a cloud transact and
Mm.
co-selling perspective, but also figuring out what your channel play is. And
Mm.
channel, I feel, for a lot of ISVs, is daunting and complex,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because you have distribution, you have systems integration partners, you have resale partners and VARs, you have everything in between, MSPs even nowadays too. So there's lots of different types of partners that are either reselling, consulting, managing your product, or potentially managing your product as a service. And I think figuring out what your strategy is, or at least what directionality you want as far as that is concerned, is another really important piece. And I do feel like that's a huge challenge for a lot of companies, is that lack of control over the entire sales process, or abdicating a little bit of that to a partner, is challenging for founders. So do I have the answer as far as what what the right answer is for a founder to be comfortable with that? I don't, other than you know leverage people in the ecosystem, leverage consulting partners like Partner Tribe, leverage somebody who has some kind of background in that world to get perspective. And one plug just to resources out there, things that are super, super helpful is around partnerships, there's so much more content and information than
Mm.
there used to be. And this is
Oh
a
yeah,
testament to that.
yeah, yeah.
So Andre, I appreciate you giving us all a vehicle to share this. Partner information is kind of a siloed thing, or it historically has been. And nowadays, I mean, with things like LinkedIn, you can go out there and there's lots of there's so many names, right? But there's so much information and so many groups out there where people share their experiences, and I would say seek that out. It's typically a free resource, and you can get out there and find out a lot. But
Oh, absolutely.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of the nuance though after that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there is, as you said, right? You said, would you know now what exactly it is? But the thing is, it is really different to each different situation and what you're trying to do, right? So, as a partner leader and us as a partner consulting business, we don't have a one fits all answer to everything, right? It's, it is really based on where you're standing, what you're trying to do. What I'm noticing quite a lot with the work that I've done, and I'm sure you have probably seen nuances that in own company or the one before, is that usually the way it starts up is you appoint a sales guy, right, to say you are partnerships now. So now go out, call some partners, right? And then
Yep.
or the other thing is you're really starting off having these early organic partnerships that just happen because of the relationship that you have with your customers or etc. And then they start happening, and you're very happy about that. But then you actually really don't have a mechanism to identify, is this the right partnership? Is this going to be causing us issues down the lane? Are we investing a lot of time here that we're not going to get back? And that is something that is very important, because pretty much similarly to investors, where you only find out a few years later whether you were a good investor or not, right? You don't know that from the beginning. You know this only a few years later, based on what were the picks that you've made and based on the work that you've done to evaluate, right? And it's exactly the same thing with building a partnership business, right? You need to be sure what you want first and what fits to your business before you then go and find these partners. Because I have had a lot of customers that ended up basically taking a lot of these partners on that came organically to them, only to realize that a year later that only two of them, or let's say 80% of them, have not done anything, right? And
Mhm.
it didn't go into the direction because it just fell flat, right? Because there was a mismatch of what both of these partners wanted to get out of it, and what that didn't support the end goal that the business had, right? So it was, and that is one of the biggest danger right now, because then what founders very often do is they go and say, okay, we're going to scrap the whole thing, right? And that is based on, basically it's almost like you had you had a bad experience, but now you're scared of doing it again. So you're saying, okay, let's just not do it again in the first place. But what you at that point don't know is that, if you had it done it right the first time, then you probably wouldn't have had that problem, right? So it's a little bit of venturing out into that and being careful. So that makes your points also make absolute sense.
No, well, I'd
So
love to
yeah,
make one
thank you for that.
comment about that. That
Mm,
you brought up a great point, and that is a lot of businesses just go, oh, well, a salesperson, can just
mm,
go and do this role, or an XDR or whatever, even a pre-sales person. It's like, they already talk to that partner all the time, so we'll just have them be the partner person. I'm not against that, um, but the one landmine I would advise people to try to avoid is don't have it as a plus, meaning don't have that person, that XDR, the salesperson,
mm,
pre-sales, whatever their role is. Don't have alliances be and they do alliances.
mm.
I
Yeah, yeah.
do. I'm a strong proponent of an alliances function, which if you're a founder, if you're a dollars and cents person in the business, sometimes again, you look at that as a cost center and you go, well, I'm paying this person to do whatever, and the tangible results are somewhat, squishy. They're not
Mm,
hard dollars that I'm realizing in the business. Well, again, I think the way you measure it is a way you can uh, realize or at least measure the return on investment, and that's through closed one influence. It could be through sourced pipeline. It could be through opportunities that are sales accepted opportunities. It could be a bunch of different things, right,
Mm,
that you could measure to see success in that partnership. But again, having people discreetly focused on that partnership function, I think, is critical to a
mm,
business, and I don't think that should be ignored, because again, there's a lot of different hats businesses can wear, and I think it all depends on the size of your organization as well. But thinking if you're a little bit later stage startup, for example, either consider having someone in house to manage that function, or
mm.
leverage a third party resource to do that. But don't just go and then so and so will do this
No,
and
yeah.
then partnerships. Yep.
Exactly. No, no, fully agree. And that is, I think, where a lot of that, nowadays, as you said, the resources are out there, right? We have a lot of resources that can help you with the early steps. We have organizations out there like Channel Force, where I'm doing a little shout out there, because they have really a great methodology on bringing that kind of data-driven approach that we see a lot in direct sales into the partnership world. So they doing really great job of that and making it measurable. Like, for example, if you do one of the big topics that is still kind of a red flag most of the time is how do you do things like territory planning for partnerships, right? Because that's usually difficult. You usually just focus on, okay, how many partners do we have? How many leads do they can they bring, right? And then you build it up based on that. But we all know that that number is probably not going to be realistic, because you cannot control it. The lack of control is there. So they have really come up with like a calculator that helps really making it very specific based on taking things into consideration. They have an approach on focusing on the partner seller rather than how many partners do we have. So things like this is out there, which is really helpful. That helps with that initial, the kind of initial hurdle of, okay, how do we actually get started, right? And how should we think about partnerships? But I fully agree. It is a strategic topic within the organization, and it deserves its own business unit, right? You wouldn't go and start a marketing team by saying to somebody from sales, "Hey, you are in charge of marketing now," and call some people, right, to flyers or something. No, you bring somebody in who really knows what they're doing, and then you build a strategy, and then you execute on what is the right thing for the business, right, and then take it from there.
That's a
So
funny
yeah,
comment to make. Is I
yeah,
almost liken it to how the infosec role has been
mm,
broken out, and we have a CISO
yeah,
role now
yeah,
from
yeah, yeah,
from
yeah.
a traditional CIO. It's about domain expertise,
Mm,
and there's nuance, just like everything. I think everything has a level of complexity, because if we think about the world in which we live now, um, all the easy stuff has been done. I hate to
mm,
be cliche about that, but I mean, think about how long the modern web has been around. I mean,
mm,
say 2000. And yeah, okay, a lot of people were still on dial up and all that. But we rapidly, became web 1.0 and then 2.0 and 3.0, and now we're AI everything, right? So, and again, I don't poo-poo AI. I think AI is going to be a huge game changer for not only businesses all up, but I mean for even partnerships. I think that there's going to be economies of scale and automation capabilities around partnership that AI is going to help with. But the point is that it's its own practice, it's its own
mm,
domain, and skills, expertise, knowledge, and network is critical in that. And I would even say that you know moreover, for ecosystem um engagement, knowing who's who in the proverbial zoo, I think that's critical. And especially the way these big organizations change, and the politics of a Microsoft, of an AWS, knowing who, oh,
mm,
well, such and such leader left Google and went to Microsoft, or vice versa, or knowing what the remit is of those individuals, and being able to map that out. That's expertise that, to your point, you're not going to expect someone in sales or
mm,
marketing to know that. And it's something that takes time and effort. So again, I do think that there's a maturity of modern SaaS software sales, or even just modern technology sales. And that is, it's not just, one specific piece of we just have a technology that satisfies your business requirement. It's about the value behind there. And the value behind there is not just in your technology.
mm,
I mean, selfishly, we want it to be all about us when we're in an
Of course.
ISV. You know, we want to sell our software. It's the
Yeah.
best thing since sliced bread. But how does it fit into a much bigger
Mm,
picture,
mm,
and a much more rich picture that a customer has from a technology perspective in an enterprise? And part of that picture is going to include specifically the big guys. You know, they're going
mm,
to have commitments with AWS. They're going to have commitments with Microsoft. How do I leverage those commitments to the big guys when I'm, this small ISV? And thankfully these programs have matured, but again, knowing how to navigate those programs and knowing that those programs exist is, not secret knowledge, but it's domain knowledge that, again, expertise is the name of the game.
yeah. No, very, very well valid. Absolutely. And yeah, I think with that change out there, or with that availability of all of these different resources and people thinking more about partnerships before, like with everything, there will be a lot of over information at some point where you can really get suddenly very scientific about it, right? And or even philosophical. So it
You
is
know what,
all.
though, to that point, there
Yeah,
is so
yeah,
much information too. It's filtering out the noise. There's a lot of
yeah, yeah,
noise now around
yeah.
partnerships,
Exactly. Yeah.
and being able to figure out what's the important piece. Because if we think about hyperscalers and programs, they have
Mm,
programs that are, 5 miles wide and 10
mm,
miles deep. So it's like,
yeah.
where do I fit into that, and what do I need to take advantage of?
Yeah, no, very much so. Yeah, no, great. And yeah, and I think kind of just in interest of time, one last question for you, which I'm really keen to ask, and I think people will be always interested in that, and I will make this my, I think, standard last question maybe. But yeah, knowing what you know now, right? What would you have done differently? If you were now back in that situation or in that situation of building a partnership business from scratch, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now?
Oh gosh. I would say, what would I do differently? I would probably I feel like I've always been pretty good about being upfront with the business and saying, we need to have alignment between what the partnership outcomes are and what our sales organization is interested in, or even our strategic, direction as a company. Do we want to,
Mm,
again, be acquired? Do we want to, get, a partner to help us build something that we can't do ourselves? I think just having clear cut objectives around that is really important. And I think that where I really want to go in the future is to always making sure, and I don't want to state that I haven't been able to do this, but I do feel like I want to be much more firm with how
mm,
I get aligned with a sales organization. And what I mean by
mm,
that is not the relationship piece. I think I've always had very strong relationships with our sales organizations at all the companies I've been with. But I think getting the executive leadership team to embed partner in the motion, I think that's where I would love to do it differently. Because it's always been, a lot of times partners, especially things like marketplaces, are avenues of last resort for a salesperson. Like, the salesperson gets to a point where the deal's, right on the edge, but they just can't close it. And they're like, oh, I found out there's AWS or Microsoft spend commitment. So I can leverage the marketplace and quickly get this over the finish line.
mm, mm,
And that works. I mean, it does work, but
mm,
it doesn't scale.
mm,
And thinking about that as a capability that the partnership brings, and embedding that at the beginning of the sales process. And it doesn't matter if you're using Sandler or, MedPick, or whatever sales process you have, winning by design, doesn't matter. You can, in your qualification stages, you can embed partnership in that. And I think that embedding in the sales play
mm.
early, and and incentivizing that behavior is really, really important for the business. And that's the one thing I would love to do differently going forward. I think that's
Right.
something
Yeah.
I've been able to affect change on, but
Mm.
I would love to do that from the bat,
From
for
the
right
bit.
off the
Yeah.
bat,
Yeah.
so I don't have to
Absolutely.
deal with it down the road. So that's probably the
I
biggest thing.
totally feel with you there. And I think that is also, if I said, okay, please, all the founders out there, if you starting, your partnership business, please be aware that appointing somebody to be a partner leader, coming in as the first point person on the ground, that can be a very lonely job, right? It's a very lonely job, right? If you don't have, because you're dealing with potentially department heads, actually potentially everyone in the business that really doesn't quite understand what you do. They have the expectations of the direct sales, speed and agility of, yeah, this is what's going to happen. But we all know that that's not realistic, right? So there's a lot of groundwork to be done. So for a while, you might not hear anything because you're in your silo building that, right? But it is incredibly important to bring in the sales team, understand what is expected of them, understand what they what they can expect of you, and having that real alignment. And you can only get that if you have the support from the from leadership, right? Otherwise, that's not going to happen, right? If you think you can you can put a partnership person in the silo and let him do his thing, and he comes back with, hey, I called 10 partners and we've got a business now. That's not how it's going to work. It does require that alignment internally with the different parts of the business. And yeah, so I think that is definitely one. I think you mentioned another very important thing, which is scale. A partnership strategy, a partnership business does not make sense when it's not scalable. It makes no sense. It will cost you more, it will take more time, and you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. So making it scalable is probably one of the key things that you need to do building a business. So that's where we, kind of help quite a lot with. But yeah, so this is, absolutely spot on. I really enjoyed that talk, Bradley. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope we can do it again. I'm sure it wasn't going to be the last time you were on the show, but yeah, really, really enjoyed having you on, man. Thank you so
Well, I
much.
appreciate you, allowing me to be the inaugural individual that was interviewed for this.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
shameless plug, own
yeah.
company. We're,
Mm.
a software, SaaS data protection firm. And one thing that I would leave your audience with is partnerships. There's troughs, right? There's highs and lows. And the only thing I can advise is just stick with it. Stick with it. There's going to be times where you're challenged by it, but if you stick with it, it will pay off in the end. So that's
Awesome.
what I'll leave everyone with.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Brad. Really appreciate it, and have a
Thanks,
good one.
Andre. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.